Saibji just told you that I was a consultant to the Prime Minister of Namibia. She's absolutely right, except that after that he lost the elections. And I was also a consultant to the Chief Minister of Delhi, after which he died. You want to take my advice, you want to listen to me, your call. Of course, I was asked to speak for 12 minutes, which is for an ex-professor a bit of a nightmare anyway. And how do I condense all that into 12 minutes? What I thought I'd do is two things. These are two books I've written. I've written others as well, but these are two on the subject of startups. And what I thought I'd do is, I'll talk about one story, one startup that I've been involved in, and then I will also talk about, this whole business of angel investing and what it means, what's the opportunity, etc. And all this obviously is from the book. I want to mention one very important thing here. When you want to learn about, let's say, acting, you go to Bollywood and maybe you will learn from Shah Rukh Khan or Amitabh Bachchan or Muzaffar ji, who was here right now. Wonderful, learn from them. But what about the guy who came from Punjab, the fields of Punjab, tractor chalata tha? He tried his luck, it didn't work, he went back frustrated. Why did he fail? I think it's very, very important to understand that, even more than to understand what Shah Rukh Khan has done. Right? And therefore, I think it's very important to learn from failures, particularly other people's failures. Unfortunately, most failures are not talked about. So one thing which we have in both these books, which are shown over there, is we have a lot of failures in both. Failure stories as well as success stories, and hopefully you learn from both. So one thing which I've tried to do over my, let's say, last 10, 12 odd years of angel investing and a lot of mentoring, I've been mentoring about, must have been some 200-300 startups, is that mistakes are common and successful startups do similar things right. And therefore, based on all this, I've tried to create a framework which I call persistent, which is what both books are based on. And I don't want to go into these in detail, it will take a long time, but essentially each letter of persistence stands for something. For example, P is, are you solving a problem for somebody? E is, do you have an earnings model, which means, is the guy paying you for solving that problem, and so on. But what I will do instead is I will take you through one story, one example, and use that and analyze it using the persistent framework that I've talked about. 3 people in this room have already heard this story, so please do not interrupt me. The rest of you hopefully have not. There is one question which I always ask the audience, which is, what is the problem with weddings? Okay, and if it's a largely married audience, everybody starts laughing. I don't have solutions to those problems. Nobody has, not even the gentleman sitting upstairs. But I am only talking about something very, very specific, which is the problem with wedding gifts. Right? And what's the problem with wedding gifts? Unwanted, useless, multiple guests giving exactly the same thing. Take an example. You have Rohel sitting here. Where's Rohel? Okay. So let's say Rohel, I am a friend of Rohel's. I am getting married. Rohel says, here, for Dhruv and his wife. Utterly useless. I'm sorry, I'm just taking you as an example. Right? What do? First I curse the hell out of Rohel, and then I say, hang on, where the hell do I pass it on? Anurag Batra. Okay? And Anurag does what? He curses the hell out of me and then says, who do I? Oh, Professor Amit Kapoor. So it's a cyclical industry where useless gifts get passed on from person to person and curses get passed on in the opposite direction. Meaningless. Now, in the Western world, US, Western Europe, UK, there is a very good solution to this, and it's called the Wedding Gift Registry. And I've just named it Wed Gift. And how it works, I'm sure some of you are familiar. How it works is very simple. A wedding gift registry is basically an e-commerce site, like Amazon or Flipkart, of course much smaller. But they don't sell, conventional grocery items like jam or biscuits or atta or whatever. No. they will only stock large numbers and large choices of typical wedding gift items. Right? Now what happens is the couple that is getting married, they go to this wedding gift registry and they select out of all these options available those 50, 60 things that they might want. So that becomes their wish list, and that's a page on the internet. Now the couple sends out their cards, and today it's only e-cards or WhatsApp cards. Each card has a link. You click on that link, the guest clicks on that link, and where does it take that guest? To the wish list. Right? So the guest knows what the couple wants and therefore decides to buy whatever he or she wants. And maybe 10 days, 15 days after the wedding, the gift is nicely wrapped and delivered to the couple. It works wonderfully in the US and Western Europe, wonderfully. So this organization came to us, this startup, brilliant people, very good people. And they had created a wedding gift registry for India. They said it has worked so well abroad, surely it will work here. 3 problems. And let me explain the problems. Number 1, cultural issues. And for a minute, I need to switch to Hindi. Is that okay, Rohel? Punjabi bhi chalega, but Hindi. Just imagine a conversation between a parent and a child who's getting married, right? And the child has opted for a wedding gift registry. Yeah? What does the parent say? Mother to daughter, for example. तू पागल है? तू क्या कर रही है? गिफ्ट डिमांड कर रही है? What's the next statement? सारी बिरादरी में हमारी. So, there is a fundamental cultural issue, and I've got tired of telling young founders, boss, you cannot change cultural barriers. They've been there for thousands of years. They'll continue for God knows how many hundreds or thousands of years. Don't ever imagine that a huge amount of marketing spend will take care of this problem. It won't. So that's number 1. Number 2. You remember I talked about the earnings model in that persistent framework. We spoke to a few guests, and they said yes, we had visited this site, and it was very good because we were able to figure out what the couple wanted. But then what we did? We said, hang on, now we know, we've decided on this 6 coffee mugs, and we know what the couple wants. Let's go to Amazon and figure out maybe it's cheaper. They went to Amazon, guaranteed it was cheaper. Why? Because Amazon deals in bulk. They'll arm twist vendors, they'll have low prices, heavy discounts, which to a large extent are passed on to the customer. So this site ultimately it was not a business. It was only what I call a listing site. There's no revenue, there's no earnings model. Right? So problem number 2. Anurag, I just sent you a wedding gift and you've cursed me for it. But you missed that portion. I'll explain over lunch. So problem number 3. What's to prevent Amazon from entering the same business? All they need is ribbons and fancy packaging. Actually they have. So the fundamental issue which a lot of founders have blundered into is they try to compete with a giant. You need a very, very strong entry barrier which prevents the other guys from getting in, taking away your customers and therefore killing you. So if I were to summarize all this with the persistent model, the size of the market was far lower than they originally anticipated because of the cultural biases. The earnings model didn't exist, and finally there's no entry barrier because the other guy also can enter. So they had no traction, very little revenue, couldn't get money, closed down. Okay? So one very good example of a failure story. Of course, there are many more in the books, both failures and successes. What I'll talk about now, if I have time, So when you're raising funds, and this is a very fundamental, see, these books are essentially aimed at 2 classes of people. They are aimed at either founders or people who want to become founders, and you'll be surprised at the number of people in that category. You go to colleges, I would say every second college student has a startup, right? And every second college student says, "Mereko funding kahan se milegi?" And the other category is the investors. So these books have been written for both these categories. So now if you look at funding, obviously first is your chacha, mama, dada, dadi, etc., father, mother, of course. In-laws, very important, very solid source of funding. But after that, you go to outsiders, which means people who don't know you. And that's angel investors. Right? Now, fundamental question that founders have asked me is, what do angels look for? And the answer is very simple. It's the same. You know, I think it's very important for both founders and, for founders to realize that they and investors are actually on the same page. They want a successful, fast-growing company which ultimately becomes profitable, has an entry barrier which keeps out competition, and so on. That's all. So ultimately, it's the same things that both sides require. Now, if you look at angel investing, there has been a real boom. I'm from Lead Angels network, and we've seen the boom in the last, I would say, 2-3 years. So let me explain this. See, if you go back about 15-20 years in time, you only had a few rich angels, right? So people like Ratan Tata, Narayan Murthy, right? Azim Premji, Ruhail Amin, Anurag Batra, you know, the real super rich HNIs. And they would say, you want 1 crore? You ask Ruhail, uske wallet mein 1 crore cash hoga. Right? So, no problem, I'll put it in. So one angel or at the most 2 were enough to fund a given startup's requirements. Now what has happened? Now what has happened is there is booming interest, and I think the reason for this booming interest is very, very obvious. Look at the valuations companies are getting today, right? Even though they've gone down in the last 6-7 odd months. Byju's at 30 billion, Zomato at 11 billion, Grofers at maybe 4 or 5 billion, Oyo Rooms at, I mean, these are just phenomenal. Now, the problem is every person, I'm saying every individual in India, not just the rich HNIs, he says, I want to be part of the story. Not when the IPO lists, no, because by then all the juice has been taken out. I want to be part of the story when the startup is at an early stage, so I ride on the growth and I ride on the valuation increase. Right? So there is phenomenal interest, and a lot of people, you know, I keep, whenever I meet people and they come to know that I am an angel investor and I am part of Lead Angels, acha boss, mere ko bhi banna hai. So I have a term for this, which I will share here. I call them the Aam Aadmi angel investors, right? Unlike the super rich guys. One clarification, absolutely no connection with Kejriwal's party, right? So, you know, the Aam Aadmi angel is guys like me. I've been a professor for 20 years. Government salary. My wife is a school teacher. School salary. I can't put in 2 crores. I can't put in 1 crore, but I can definitely put in a couple of lakhs. Oops. 2 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs, 5 lakhs. No problem, right? And potentially there's an army of such people just waiting to grab the opportunity. However, there are problems. Problem number 1 is, because you're putting in small amounts, one Ratan Tata or one Azim Premji or, you know, is not enough. Because now you may need 30-40 Aam Aadmi angels to get together. Number 1. Therefore, you need some mechanism of bringing them together, and that is where angel networks come in. And I'll speak a little bit about this. Secondly, who supports the Aam Aadmi angel? See, there are many, it's not an easy job, investing in these startups. So firstly, you have to identify startups. Which of them are likely to be good, do you even know which startups are looking for funding? So that's one. Secondly, this entire business of business evaluation, due diligence, making the shareholder agreement, etc., even post-investment monitoring, the Aam Aadmi angel does not have that kind of resource which Ratan Tata and Nandan Nilekani did. Therefore, they need support. Who provides that support? The angel network. Okay? And by the way, we are one of the large angel networks in the country. There are about 8 or 9 large ones. So I'm not talking of lead angels, I'm talking of angel networks in general. Essentially, I'll just take a minute. Essentially, you know, an angel network supports both startups and Aam Aadmi angels, and also HNIs, because it's like a club, Delhi Gymkhana Club, for instance, right? Every club has members, and the network also has members, and these members are all angel investors, Aam Aadmi angels. It brings in potential startups, shortlists them, helps the members to evaluate them, and ultimately helps them to do the due diligence, etc. Finally, sign the shareholder agreement and get invested. So that's broadly what happens to Aam Aadmi angels. So the other issue which a lot of founders have come to me, very early stage, very low revenues or sometimes no revenues at all. Sir, you know, a lot of VCs are, I've met lots of VCs, they're showing a lot of interest. Sir, paisa nahi mil raha. I said, nahi milega. Kyun nahi milega? I have to explain, and that's one thing which we put down in the books. You know, there is a fundamental difference between the angel and the VC, which I think every investor and every founder needs to understand. And it's a little like investing in the stock market. I'll take an analogy. You know, in the stock market, you have two options. Option one is you decide, look, Reliance is a wonderful company, I like the way it's running, etc., etc., I'm going to buy shares. That's your call, your money, your decision. On the other hand, you say, I want to be in the stock market, but I don't have the time, I don't have the know-how, so I'll give my money to a mutual fund, and the fund manager will invest my money on my behalf. I have nothing to do with it, I have given the responsibility to him, right? VCs and angels broadly, although there are exceptions, are fairly similar. The angel puts in his own money, whereas an investor who wants to invest parks his money with the VC, and the fund manager of the VC invests that money on their behalf, right? So it's not his own money, and that's the fundamental difference. And because the VC does not invest their own money, the VC has to take less risk. They're running a business. You know, I can say 5 lakhs, dala. The VC can't. VC has to think 6 times. Therefore, the VC invests typically at a later stage. The angels will invest at a very early stage when risks are high, valuations are low, they'll put in small amounts. The VC will invest at a later stage. Why? Because by then the business is hopefully more mature, hopefully more stable, although there's no guarantee, things can still collapse, as you've seen in many cases. But because of that, they invest at a higher valuation and much larger amounts. And that's the fundamental difference. So startup founders at an early stage going to VCs are only wasting time. Last slide, what do VCs look for? Exactly the same. And now you can go.